After the past couple of years, it is as if our heads are finally above the water. Never in our lifetime have we experienced such polarization, such depleted levels of energy. Yet even today, it has been said that we are in a mass recovery from PTSD. But the story of these last couple of years is not just our story, it's not even our story. It is all a part of a God story, a kingdom story. A kingdom story where only union with the King will lead us to healing. Healing of the soul, healing of the people, healing of the land. God's story, where you are a part of a kingdom story.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I also really want to say morning to those of you online. We are just thankful that you're a part of our fellowship via this means, and we hope that this time does bless you as well. We are in this Kingdom Story series, and a kingdom story, like any story, has a really good backstory. And I mean, backstories are important to understanding any story, isn't it? It helps paint a much deeper picture. I mean, even in the little bumper that you've seen, we talk about the last 2.5 years, and that last 2.5 years changed a lot of things, didn't it? I know Pastor Ashley actually mentioned a couple things, even as she was up here, doing announcements that kind of come to play because of that. So there's this reality that the last couple years have shifted things. Take this service, right? Going back to a second service, and putting this, first one in. And, Brother Kev was joking about coffee to start us off. Because our volunteers, they get here real early. And so coffee is a significant subject to our volunteers. But nonetheless, here we are in the midst of this. Okay, how is this going to work? What does it look like going from one service to two services? We're still trying to figure that out, and I just want you to know that. We're still trying to figure that out. It's something we talk about regularly as a staff. And for the time being, we're going to just continue for a few more weeks at the very least to kind of see how things kind of level out and where things are at. Because, the fear for us is that if we go to one service, that we will be so full and overflow. If someone is a guest or a newcomer, there's just not going to be anywhere for them, and we don't want that at all. We always want to, be a safe place for people, but it also shifts and makes that things happen. It's a little bit thinner in the first service, right? So maybe you're even online, and you're like, okay, it's a little thinner at the first service. There you go, right? This is the place to come. You can have some space. There'll be some room around you. You know what I mean? But we're still trying to figure it out. So I know the staff has been talking about it. I know I've had a number of you ask me, how long are we going to do this? What are we going to do? We're just trying to figure it out. And I like to kind of give you the scoop on that. So that's the backstory to that. But, I mean, there's all kinds of backstories that exist. And I think a lot of us who maybe are engaged in, movies and in the cinema, there's certain moments that happen in our lifetime. If you're middle-aged like me, I'm in that crew now. It's like a term of, distinguishedness, my beard's going gray, it's happening before me. You never forget moments that go like this: Luke, I am your father, right? You don't forget those moments because they just drip with backstory, right? Backstory is important in the world of sports, and Pastor Ashley jokes with me lots about football and how she knows nothing about it, and it never makes sense when I tell football stories. So I do my best to not tell too many football stories. But our kind of joke is that she has a team. It's the Fort Alliance team, right? Which is why we love wearing our church merch, which you too can wear if you purchase one at the back. But this is our team, right? This is the team we play together on. But, backstory, last year my son's football team, They won a championship, which is cool and fun to say, but until you hear the backstory that the year before they lost every single game, it doesn't land until like, yeah, that backstory is cool, right? Well, it is exactly the same in a kingdom story. There's a backstory that really exists, and it actually is woven all the way through these scriptures, and it is thick. It is just drenched with the clear communication of a kingdom mindset, a kingdom story that exists. And I can't even scratch the surface this morning. And I generally like to kind of look at one passage and kind of just stick there. But today, I got my bookmarks in because we're going to jump through a ton of passages. And so, like, have your Bibles kind of ready and available, or maybe you even want to use your YouVersion app, because I'm going to move pretty quick through a number. And like I said, I'm not even scratching the surface. But it's so important for us as we continue in a kingdom story to understand there's this narrative that really exists from the very beginning that shows how significant the kingdom story is to God. And so to do that, we got to go right back to the very beginning in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So that's where we're going to start off real quick. Now, I have mentioned Genesis 1, 2, and 3 many times over the few years now that I've been with you guys, and it is so significant, for me at least, and this isn't an authoritative statement, this is just for me. For me, they're probably my favorite 3 chapters in the Bible, because there's just so much going on. That it is just telling kind of the origin story, and it's showing so deep what's happening here. And so in this kingdom story, we have a kingdom origin because the Creator, the one true God, comes and creates and brings this earth into being, and all that is there, and everything that He brings in is good. And He gets to this place in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, I'm going to start, and I'm going to read a few, where He then creates humanity. And He does so in an incredibly special way. It goes like this. So God created human beings in His own image. That's unique. It's incredibly special. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground." Then God said, "Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. And I have given you every green plant for food. I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life, and that is what happened." God creates. We got Him creating humanity. And notice the language around male and female. He created them in His image. There's a divine fingerprint, if you will, upon humanity. There's this DNA, if you will, that we are to live like, act like the one true living God. And how does that look? Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. It goes on, reign over, and then it tells the animals of the world. Do you hear that type of language? That is kingdom language. Govern over, reign over. A number of your translations, and I don't care what translation you read, I really don't. I just want you to read the scriptures. So whichever one you enjoy, that's the one you should read. All right? But a number of them are going to say things like rule. Some even go as far as say, have dominion over. Can you see the kingdom language right in the origin story? The kingdom has been created. And the task has been for humanity to rule, to reign, as image bearers of the one true God. And then, if you are a Sunday schooler like I was over the years, something horrible happens. We call it the fall, where the kingdom is corrupted and sin enters. And Adam and Eve had been given this instruction to rule and reign. And as you kind of read the account, you find out there to rule and to reign, to eat of these plants, but not of the one plant, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And yet, in the midst of the story, this slimy, slithery serpent, this antagonist, Satan, enters, manipulates, deceives, tempts. And Adam and Eve make this choice in this kingdom story, in this kingdom narrative, to look to exalt themselves above God, or to at least make themselves equal to God. And in a moment, something shifts from our ruling and reigning over this earth to something else we got to deal with. That something else is sin. Sin that's crippled us as a people since. We look at human history, we look at our history today. It doesn't take a genius to see the effects of evil and the fallen reality of this world. You know, on a kind of a side note, but very related, there's an author, his name is Chuck Davis, who writes a book called Bold Christian, who puts a very, very interesting hypothesis out on this passage, on this reality, this part of the kingdom narrative. He suggests that what's going on in this fall, this sin entering, is that Satan actually comes and usurps the authority that God had given humanity. He steals humans' authority. Thus, the need for Jesus, the one true king who we talked about last week, who we'll get to this week as well, to come and not only be fully God, but be fully human and take that authority, that rule back, and invite us to once again reign alongside him. It's a very interesting narrative. If you begin to look and read Scripture through that, very, very fascinating. But there's something that takes place in this sin entrance, this sin story, that happens in chapter 4 of Genesis, and it's with the kids of Adam and Eve. And the wording is fascinating for us today. Verse 7 is the key. I'm going to read a couple more in front. So now Adam had sexual relations with his wife, Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions from the firstborn lamb from his flock. Keep that firstborn, that first fruit image in the back of your mind for later. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected?" Here we go. "You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master." Another term you could word put in here for master is ruler. Again, a number of your translations will even say sin will look to rule over you. Do you see the shift in this kingdom story from being asked to rule and govern over the land and over the ground that we've been entrusted to now this complicated reality of having to rule over sin in the midst of that? And thousands of years later, we're still in that battle, aren't we? There's this battle, this struggle with who we are ruling over, and sin, it just messes with everything. And it is so, so clear that this kingdom story that started with perfection was quickly corrupted. The story continues, and it quickly seems oh so hopeless. I mean, if you're familiar again, and you go back to your Sunday school days and what have you, if you're familiar, we shortly after that get into the story of Noah and the flood and the ark. how the world is so corrupted, so evil within generations that God just sees at least there's one who's right in his sight, who's being faithful, and looks to create a remnant to come out, right? It's just this, that sin, it's destroying things. And so he starts all over, God does. And then after that, again, you see this cycle of sin coming, and it's as if this kingdom that was beautiful and perfect in its origin story has just been completely corrupted and devastated by this fall, this sin that just woven its way all the way through. And then finally we get to another character, a person in this account. His name is Abraham. I love how the worship music was put together today. I mean, Kevin and I barely even talked, and it was woven perfectly all the way through. Awesome when God does that. We get to Abraham, though, and again, there's one, right? There's someone who's seen as right in God's sight, someone who's willing to live by faith. And so God kind of steps in now and begins to make some beautiful promises, some incredible covenant-like promises that show there's hope. There's hope in this story that seems so difficult, that seems so tragic. And it comes to the person of Abraham. He's actually at this point in the journey called Abram. God later changes his name to Abraham. We'll get to that in a moment. But it starts in chapter 12 of Genesis. So the Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land. That's going to come up again and again, that term. That I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. Now, it's not the word kingdom, but it's very close, isn't it? I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make you famous. And you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those that treat you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you. There's hope. Hope in a kingdom story that comes through Abraham of a coming blessing to a great nation. It continues on. We're going to flip in my Bible one page. Not sure what it is in yours, but to chapter 17. In chapter 17, we find this in 3 to 6. Again, God speaking to Abraham, soon to become Abraham, and really brings this imagery out of a kingdom story. So at this, Abraham fell face down on the ground. Then God said to him, this is my covenant with you. I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. What's more, I am changing your name. It will no longer be Abraham. Instead, you will be called Abraham, for you will be the father of many nations. Here we go. Check it out. I will make you extremely fruitful. Your descendants will become many nations and what? Kings. Kings will be among them. We are just the beginning of Scripture, and you can so clearly see the kingdom narrative, a kingdom story being woven through with promises to the people of God, giving hope in the midst of a corrupted kingdom that something is going to shift. Something amazing is going to happen. A story, a narrative is going to come fully into fruition where a kingdom people will be ruled by a king, and there will be kings from them. But unfortunately, for the people of the kingdom, that sin that we were struggling to master and rule over gets the best of them. And the cycle starts where generation after generation deals with sin and the consequences of it. And none seem to be able to master. And the great-grandchildren of Abraham end up finding themselves in Egypt. Initially because of famine and just economic disaster and turmoil in the globe at that time. But as they are in Egypt, they become slaves to the people of Egypt. And history tells this story, which is oh so cool as well. But while they are there, God then miraculously intervenes and redeems his people, takes them out, leads them into something new, something fresh, into a kingdom narrative that's about to shift and has implications for us even still today. But as he does this, he also gives to them a law. And a law that has some contingencies for the land that we've already heard about that they are to go and dwell in. And so we then kind of at this point in the story find ourselves in Exodus chapter 19 where God has given a law and is revealing a law to his people that influences their land. And let's look at how he describes this in chapter 19, 4-6. Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. Announce to the descendants of Israel. Verse 4. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will obey and keep my commands, here's that law, you will be my own special treasure from among the people on earth. For all the earth belongs to me. Let me hit pause on that. This for me was the most encouraging verse of all the scripture I looked at, for me at least, as I was prepping. All the earth belongs to God, the one true King. And no matter what we face, that does not change. All the earth belongs to him. That was so encouraging to me as I was preparing. He goes on though, and you will be my, what? Kingdom of priests and my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel. You saw it for yourself. Do you see the kingdom story coming through as the king gives a law? Now here's the thing. I grew up in the 80s. I'm sick and tired of rules and laws and legalism. You know what I'm saying? Anybody else grow up in that era or raise kids in that era? Come on now. I see those hands in the crowd. Oh my goodness. I had this natural, I'm not going to do something just because you said, when it came to laws and rules and regulations. But something massive shifted in me when I read a book called The Grace of God by Andy Stanley when it comes to the law that I had never thought of, that I had never considered once before. And as I read this book, and it was a number of years ago when he released it, he spoke to the ancient Near East, which was the land and the area that existed in the midst of this happening, and how every leader, every pharaoh, every culture would have a ruler, a king, a pharaoh come in, and everyone would create a new law. And so it didn't matter what had happened before. Whatever the new guy says, that's what we're doing now. And it was if there was constant shifts, constant changing on these laws that existed in this land and in these cultures. And so God steps in for his kingdom people and says, here's a law, one law. This is what you will have now for generation after generation. And Andy Stanley words this in a way that I'll never forget. He says that actually the law was an act of grace. That hit me when I read that for the first time, because the people didn't have to wonder from generation to generation any longer, when is it going to change, what's going to happen, what's he going to do. There was an act of grace. There's going to be some consistency for you. If you obey my commands, if you keep my covenant, I'll bless you. And there will be this blessing that you will then be to others. Like God is looking to establish a law as an act of grace. But Genesis chapter 4, that ruling over sin part, the folks didn't do so good. And I ain't throwing stones, because you and me, we still don't do so good either, do we? But nonetheless, there's this law that the king established for his kingdom that's to be occupied by the kingdom of priests, a holy nation. And the final kind of passage from the books of the law anyway, I got one more after this that I want to bring out. I want to read for you. It comes from Deuteronomy chapter 11. And in Deuteronomy chapter 11, we just see God referencing this law and how it is linked to the very land that they are to dwell and to live in. So this is chapter 11 of verse 8. Therefore, be careful to obey every command I am giving you today, so you may have the strength to go in and take over the land you are about to enter. So there's the link between the law and the land again. If you obey, you will enjoy a long life in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors and to you, their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land you are about to enter and take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you came, where you planted your seed and made irrigation ditches with your foot, as in a vegetable garden. Rather, the land you will soon take over is a land of hills and of valleys, of plenty of rain, a land that the Lord your God cares for. Did you catch who's caring for the land? Your Lord your God cares for. He watches over it, because he's over all, through each season of the year. There's this law that the king has given, that the one true God is giving, and it has implications for the land, and that if there's this obedience and this following of this covenant, these things will be blessed, and these things will live out in a way that are not only honoring to God, but that are beneficial to the kingdom people. There's this narrative that we can see being established. But the cycle of sin just keeps on going throughout the entire Old Testament. And again, you see that sin begins to rule rather than God. And our submission to God takes back seats to the natural evil tendencies, the addictive ways, the very things that are not of God rule in our own heart. And this goes on throughout. And I could go to all sorts of passages to show this. But there's prophets that God's bring, people who will come and speak the truth of this kingdom story. And again, although there's many prophets I could go to, I just want to go to one more, the prophet Nathan, as he speaks over David, whom we talked about last week, and a king that would truly come and one day reign. The prophet Nathan speaks in 2 Samuel chapter 7 as he's communicating to David the heart of God in the midst of this reality of cycles of sin and us not allowing God to be the true ruler. But he gives this promise, again going back to creating an incredible hope that's linked to Abraham. So I'm in verse 11, the second half of it. Furthermore, the Lord declares that he will make a house for you, speaking to David, a dynasty of kings. For when you die and are buried with your ancestors, I will raise up one of your descendants, your own offspring, and I will make his kingdom strong. He is one who will build a house, a temple for my name, and I will secure his royal throne forever. And I will be his father, and he will be my son. If he sins, I will correct and discipline him with the rod like any other father would do. But my favor will not be taken from him as I took from Saul, whom I removed from your sight. Your house and your kingdom will continue before me for all time, and your throne will be secure forever. Sound familiar? We talked about it last week, because who came in the line of David? Jesus. A king that would rule in a kingdom forever. A king that in the midst of that rule in his kingdom would present us with a law. A law that gives us incredible keys to the land that we're to go and to take, if you will, on his behalf. a law, a land with a king that's ruling, and a kingdom story that goes all the way back to the origin, that weaves its way through the whole of Scripture, and that we also find oh so clearly throughout the New Testament, which we'll get to next week. And we're invited into this kingdom story. A kingdom story where if we will genuinely move to this place where we look to have union with our King, with King Jesus, healing is available for our soul. Healing available for the people. And healing is available for the land. But we gotta move, right? We can't be content to just be at this fringe part of the kingdom like we talked about. We gotta come to the table and look to our King and begin to engage with him, to commune with him. For there we find that healing in our own soul that will influence us as a people, that allow us to go into the land that he's asked. If you're here today, you're maybe listening online, and you've never come to that place where, you've recognized your own sin, the mastery that sin seems to have over you, maybe today's the day you do that. You surrender that part of your life to God. You come to Jesus and you say, Jesus, I'm sorry. Jesus, will you forgive me? Jesus, my life here, it's yours. You take it. I'm going to follow you. That begins a beautiful journey where you step into a kingdom and grow to this place, to this point where you just have personal communion, personal union with King Jesus. Jesus, I'm sorry. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, my life is yours. But I also want to start to apply this to you and me who've heard that before and who've come to that place. When we were talking about Cain and Abel there was this offering of the first fruit, if you will, and it brings out this picture that starts to come out. And you actually, as you look at the books of the law, and if you read the books of the law in the Old Testament, you see again and again about giving the first fruits to God, the first that you have. And over the COVID season, I listened to something, and I cannot remember where I heard it, so I'm sorry I can't source it for you. But the speaker was speaking to, what do we do with our first fruits today? Like, take, for example, the very first moments of your day, the first. What do you do with it? And for me, unfortunately, I use this little device as my alarm clock, which means the very first thing I had to do was to turn my alarm off, which then meant I picked up this little device, and all of a sudden, the first fruits of my day had developed a pattern that I've lived in for years, and I'm still trying to break, where the tyranny of the urgent, of the messages, the emails, the news cycles were there. And that took the first of my day. And the speaker I was listening to was saying, stop it. You need to give the first fruits of your day to God. You need to consciously stop that. Now, maybe you're not a cell phone user and you don't do that, and maybe I'm the only one in the room with this issue. Good, there's one more. There's two. Come on, three. Give me three. Give me three. Four. Give me four. Thank you. I see that hand. 5. But maybe it's the coffee pot. Right there, Brother Kevin. Give me my blonde Starbucks, man. What do you give your first fruits to? And the speaker that was speaking this out was saying, you need to start to consciously give God the very first moments of your day. You can't allow the tyranny of the urgent to begin to rule your day, because it sets you on a trajectory to allow that to rule as opposed to him. At the same time, and this is super cheesy, but it's just the reality, my family really loves the Chosen video series, and some people hate it, and there's going to always be haters, but whatever, we love it. In season 2, there's this episode where the disciples are around a fire, and I rewatched it preparing for today, and it brought tears to my eyes again. And they're just initially bantering about the kingdom. interestingly enough, and Rome, and that kingdom that seemed to be occupying and ruling. And then they get to this place where they start arguing with each other, arguing about Jesus' ministry, arguing and dealing with all that. And all of a sudden, Jesus comes in exhausted at the end of his day, and you can tell he has given everything he could to serve. And he lays down, and he says a short, simple prayer. It says something like this at the end of his day, where he says, King of the universe, the one who's created all, thank you for the day. And he goes to sleep. And that hit me in the midst of this season. And I've begun to consciously shift the beginning and the end of my day. And I'm not a master. I'm a practitioner like you guys trying to figure this out. Where I do touch my phone because I hit stop alarm after I've hit snooze once or twice. Janelle does it too. We set our alarms at the exact same time so the snooze cycle goes together, right? And I stop my alarm and I say a prayer that goes something like this. And there's one in front of you on your pews, where I just say, Holy Father, King Jesus, Almighty Spirit, thank you. Thank you for this new day. Thank you for the gift of life. As I start my day, I surrender. I surrender my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength to you. Use me in your kingdom story. And then I end the day much the same. The simplest of act. It takes me all of 30 seconds, but I want to consciously put the king in the right place and no longer be ruled by the tyranny of the urgent. And the kingdom story has been woven throughout all of history. And the king invites you in to be a part of that story, to rule and to reign with him. We'll talk about that more. I surrender my heart, soul, and mind, and strength. Use me. Use you in the kingdom story today.
Sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, a sinner can kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. A wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who've strayed. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, a rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. A wanderer, come. Oh, you're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come